The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape of Colorado Territory. 1875. Hope Porter clutched her infant daughter tightly against her chest as she peered out from behind a fallen log. The thundering of hooves in the distance sent shivers down her spine, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a wild stallion. 3 days on the run, and the men who had murdered her husband were still hunting her. "Hush, little one," she whispered, pressing her cracked lips against her baby's forehead. 6-week-old Lily whimpered softly, her tiny face scrunched in discomfort. Hope knew they couldn't keep going much longer. Her milk was drying up from stress and lack of food, her feet were blistered and bleeding through her worn boots, and the mountain winter was fast approaching. In the distance, the silhouette of a lone rider appeared against the crimson sky. Hope's breath caught in her throat. Not another one. She'd already escaped the clutches of 4 men since fleeing the burned remnants of her homestead. The stranger rode closer, his broad shoulders and the distinctive shape of his Stetson marking him unmistakably as a cowboy. Hope pressed herself further behind the log, but Lily chose that moment to let out a hungry wail. The rider's head turned sharply in their direction. Hope's heart sank as he veered his horse toward them. "Please," she prayed silently, "not another one of Whitaker's men." The cowboy dismounted with fluid grace, tethering his chestnut stallion to a nearby scrub. His boots crunched on the rocky ground as he approached, each step deliberate. "Hello," he called out, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle. "I know someone's out here. I ain't looking for trouble." Hope remained silent, one hand cradling Lily's head, the other reaching for the small knife tucked in her boot, the only protection she had. The stranger paused about 10 feet from her hiding spot. "I heard a baby," he said. "Out here, that means trouble. I'm just passing through, but I can't rightly leave a child in danger." There was something in his voice, a genuine concern that made Hope hesitate. Still, she'd trusted too easily before. "Madam, if you're hiding, I understand. But night's coming and these parts get mighty cold." "Dangerous too, what with wolves and such." Lily wailed again, louder this time, her tiny body shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her. Hope closed her eyes, knowing she was out of options. Slowly, she rose from behind the log, knife clutched in her trembling hand. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. The cowboy raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. In the fading light, Hope could make out his features' strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a long scar that ran from his right temple to his cheekbone. "Name's Quinn Rafferty," he said calmly. "I work cattle for the Double R, about 30 miles north of here." "I don't care who you are," Hope replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just ride on and leave us be." Quinn's eyes moved from Hope's face to the bundle in her arms, then down to her bloodied feet visible beneath her tattered dress. "You're running from something," he observed, not a question but a statement. "Or someone." Hope said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Madam, I'm not here to hurt you or take what ain't mine, but you and that little one won't survive another night out here. There's a storm brewing." He gestured toward the darkening clouds gathering over the mountains. As if to emphasize his point, a cold wind gusted through the small clearing, causing Lily to cry out again. Hope swayed slightly, exhaustion threatening to overcome her. Quinn took a cautious step forward. "I can help you," he offered. "My cabin's not far. Food, warmth, safety." "How do I know you're not working for Whitaker?" Hope blurted out, immediately regretting revealing even that small piece of information. Quinn's expression hardened slightly. "Edgar Whitaker, that land-grabbing murderer," he shook his head. "I'd sooner cut off my own arm than work for the likes of him." Hope studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she still hesitated. "He has men everywhere. They killed my husband. They're looking for me, for us." She glanced down at Lily. "Why would Whitaker's men be after a woman and a baby?" Quinn asked, his brow furrowed. "Because my husband had proof," Hope whispered. "Proof that Whitaker's been forging land deeds. Thomas hid it before they—" Her voice broke. Quinn was quiet for a moment. "I can't force you to trust me, madam, but that little one deserves a chance." He nodded toward Lily. "And you look like you haven't eaten in days." Hope's stomach growled traitorously at the mention of food. She looked down at Lily, whose cries had subsided into pitiful whimpers. "What choice did she have? If you try anything," she warned, gripping her knife tighter, "I'll kill you in your sleep." To her surprise, Quinn's mouth quirked up in a half-smile. "Fair enough." He turned and walked back to his horse, giving her space. "Can you ride? It's about an hour to my place." Hope nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure she had the strength. Quinn mounted his stallion, then extended his hand down to her. "Please don't take my baby," she cried suddenly, clutching Lily tighter as panic overwhelmed her. The thought of surrendering her child, even momentarily, was unbearable. Quinn's expression softened. "Madam, I'm here to carry you both home," he said gently. "I won't separate you from your child." Something in his words, in the steady look in his eyes, made Hope believe him. With a deep breath, she tucked the knife back into her boot and accepted his hand. With surprising strength, Quinn pulled her up behind him, careful not to disturb the baby. "Hold on tight," he instructed, "and tell me if we need to stop." Hope wrapped one arm around his waist, the other securing Lily between them. As the horse set off at a steady trot, she found herself leaning against Quinn's broad back, the steady rhythm of his breathing oddly comforting. The last rays of sunlight disappeared as they rode, leaving only the silver glow of the moon to light their path. Hope felt herself drifting in and out of consciousness, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up to her. "Stay with me, madam," Quinn called back, his voice cutting through her fog. "Talk to me." "What's your name?" "Hope," she murmured. "Hope Porter. And the little one, Lily." Just saying her daughter's name brought a rush of love that momentarily pushed back her fatigue. "Pretty name," Quinn commented. "How old is she?" 6 weeks yesterday." Hope paused. "At least I think it was yesterday. The days have blurred." Quinn made a sound of understanding. "And you've been on the run all this time?" "No," Hope replied, her voice barely audible over the horse's hoofbeats. "Thomas was killed 3 days ago. I grabbed what I could and ran with Lily before they could come back." Quinn didn't respond immediately, but she felt his muscles tense beneath her arm. "Whitaker will pay for what he's done," he finally said, his voice low and dangerous. "But first, we need to get you two safe." Hope wanted to ask what he meant, how one cowboy could stand against a man as powerful as Edgar Whitaker, but fatigue overwhelmed her. She pressed her cheek against Quinn's back, inhaling the scent of leather and pine, and surrendered to exhaustion. She awoke to stillness and warmth. Blinking in confusion, Hope found herself lying on a narrow bed, covered with a thick woolen blanket. Panic seized her as she realized Lily wasn't in her arms. "Lily," she cried, bolting upright. "She's right here," came Quinn's calm voice from across the small cabin. He was sitting in a rocking chair by the fire, cradling Lily in his arms. The baby was sucking contentedly on a cloth dipped in what smelled like warm milk. "I had to feed her," Quinn explained, seeing Hope's expression. "You were out cold, and she was hungry something fierce. My ma taught me how to feed the young ones when the milk cow wouldn't cooperate." Hope's panic subsided, replaced by a strange feeling as she watched this rugged cowboy tenderly caring for her daughter. His large, calloused hands held Lily with surprising gentleness. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Quinn nodded, then rose carefully and brought Lily to her. Hope took her daughter eagerly, checking her over before pressing a kiss to her forehead. "There's stew on the stove," Quinn said, moving to a small kitchenette in the corner of the one-room cabin. "Nothing fancy, but it'll put strength back in you." Hope suddenly realized how ravenous she was. "How long was I asleep?" "About 4 hours," Quinn replied, ladling stew into a bowl. "You needed it." He brought the bowl to her, along with a chunk of rough bread. Hope shifted Lily to one arm and accepted the food with the other, nearly moaning at the first spoonful of the rich venison stew. "This is wonderful," she said between bites, realizing it was the first proper meal she'd had since fleeing her home. Quinn shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by the compliment. "Like I said, nothing fancy." Hope ate in silence for a few minutes, aware of Quinn watching her from his position by the fire. He'd stoked it higher, and the cabin was pleasantly warm despite the howling wind outside. "The storm hit just after we got here," Quinn explained, noticing her glance toward the window. "You're lucky I found you when I did." Hope nodded, setting down her empty bowl. "Why were you out there?" she asked. "You said your ranch is 30 miles north." Quinn hesitated. "I was tracking someone, one of Whitaker's men." Hope tensed. "Why?" "That's a long story," Quinn said, his eyes darkening. "One that starts 3 years ago when Whitaker's men burned my family's ranch to the ground." Hope's hand flew to her mouth. "Your family?" "My parents died in the fire," Quinn said flatly. "I was in town that day selling cattle. By the time I got back..." He trailed off, staring into the flames. "I'm so sorry," Hope whispered, understanding all too well the pain of such loss. Quinn seemed to shake himself from his memories. "That's why I know you're telling the truth about Whitaker. He's been doing this for years, forcing people off their land through intimidation or worse, then forging documents to claim ownership." "That's what Thomas discovered," Hope confirmed. "He was the county clerk's assistant. He found discrepancies in the land records and started investigating privately." "And Whitaker found out," Quinn finished grimly. Hope nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "They came at night. Thomas told me to hide in the root cellar with Lily. I heard the shots." Her voice broke. "When they were gone, I came out and found him on the porch. He told me he'd hidden the documents somewhere safe, then made me promise to take Lily and run. He died in my arms." A tear slid down her cheek, followed by another. Quinn crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed, awkwardly placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know words don't help much," he said quietly, "but you did right by him, getting yourself and the little one to safety." Hope looked up at him through tear-blurred vision. "But for how long? Whitaker won't stop looking. And now I've dragged you into it." Quinn's expression hardened. "You didn't drag me anywhere, Mrs. Porter. I've been looking for a way to bring Whitaker down for 3 years. If your husband found evidence that could do that, then meeting you was providence." Hope wasn't so sure. "The evidence is hidden. Thomas didn't even tell me where for my protection." "Then we'll figure it out," Quinn said with surprising determination. "But first you need rest. Real rest, not passing out from exhaustion." As if on cue, Lily began to fuss. Hope shifted her attention to her daughter, recognizing the signs of hunger. "I need to feed her," she said, suddenly self-conscious. Quinn immediately stood. "I'll step outside, check on the horse." "In this storm?" Hope asked, surprised. "He's in the lean-to." "He'll be fine, but I should make sure." Quinn grabbed his coat and hat. "Take your time." After he left, Hope unbuttoned her dress and put Lily to her breast. The baby latched eagerly, and Hope prayed her milk would return properly now that she was fed and rested. She gazed around the small cabin as Lily nursed. It was simple but well-maintained. A wooden table with 2 chairs sat near the kitchenette. The bed she occupied was neatly made with clean, if patched, linens. A trunk at the foot of the bed presumably held Quinn's personal belongings. On the wall hung a Winchester rifle and a gun belt with a Colt revolver. Various tools and necessities of frontier life were organized on shelves along one wall. What caught her attention, though, was a small, framed daguerreotype on the mantel above the fireplace. From her position, Hope could make out the images of a man and woman, presumably Quinn's parents, and a younger version of Quinn himself, perhaps 16 or 17. By the time Quinn returned, stamping snow from his boots, Hope had finished feeding Lily and was gently burping her against her shoulder. "Storm's getting worse," Quinn reported, hanging his coat on a peg by the door. "We might be stuck here for a couple of days." Hope nodded, trying not to show her worry. Every day stationary was another day Whitaker's men could be closing in. "You should take the bed," Quinn said, moving to arrange blankets on the floor near the fire. "I'll be fine down here." "I can't take your bed," Hope protested. "You're not taking it, I'm offering it," Quinn replied firmly. "You and the little one need proper rest." Too exhausted to argue further, Hope nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Rafferty, for everything." "Quinn," he corrected. "Just Quinn is fine." "Quinn," Hope repeated softly. "Then you must call me Hope." Their eyes met across the small cabin, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared loss and unexpected connection. Quinn was the first to look away. "Get some sleep, Hope. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next steps." Hope settled back onto the bed, Lily tucked securely beside her. As she drifted off to sleep, she realized that for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something close to safe. The next morning dawned bright and cold, the storm having passed during the night. Hope awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Quinn moving quietly around the cabin. Lily was still sleeping peacefully beside her, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "Morning," Quinn greeted when he noticed her stirring. He was at the stove, stirring something in a cast iron pan. "Hope you like eggs and bacon." "Sounds wonderful," Hope replied, carefully sitting up to avoid disturbing Lily. She realized someone had placed a basin of water, a cloth, and a bar of soap on the trunk at the foot of the bed. "Did you?" "Thought you might want to freshen up," Quinn said, keeping his attention on the cooking. "There's a clean shirt of mine there too if you want to change. It'll be big, but—" "Thank you," Hope said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'll just—" She gestured toward Lily. Quinn nodded. "Take your time. Food'll keep." Hope washed as best she could, grateful for the chance to clean away days of grime and fear. The cold water was revitalizing, and Quinn's shirt, though indeed far too large, was clean and soft from many washings. She rolled up the sleeves and used a piece of cord to cinch it around her waist, creating a makeshift dress that was far more comfortable than her soiled, torn clothing. When she joined Quinn at the table, Lily beginning to stir in her arms, he gave her an approving glance. "Looks better on you than it ever did on me," he commented, then immediately seemed embarrassed by his own words. He busied himself serving breakfast onto tin plates. "How's the little one this morning?" "Hungry as usual," Hope replied with a small smile, grateful for the change of subject. But she slept through the night for the first time in days. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds Lily's occasional coos and the crackle of the fire. Hope found herself studying Quinn when he wasn't looking the way his hands, rough from ranch work, moved with surprising grace. The thoughtful expression in his eyes as he gazed into the fire, the slight curl of his dark hair at the nape of his neck. "We need to talk about what happens next," Quinn finally said, setting down his empty coffee cup. "Whitaker's men will be searching for you." Hope's brief sense of peace evaporated. "I know, but I don't even know where to start looking for Thomas's evidence." Quinn considered this. You said he was the clerk's assistant. Would he have hidden it at the county office? Hope shook her head. Too risky. Whitaker has people everywhere, including the sheriff's office. What about your home? Quinn suggested. Could he have hidden it there before they came? Hope bit her lip, thinking. Maybe. He had a loose floorboard in our bedroom where he kept important papers, but I checked it before I left. It was empty. Quinn frowned, tapping his fingers against the table. What else was special to him? A place he felt safe. Hope's mind raced through possibilities. Wait, she said suddenly, remembering something. The old oak. There's an enormous oak tree on the north edge of our property. Thomas carved our initials in it when we first moved to the homestead. He used to say it was the one thing Whitaker couldn't burn down. Quinn's eyes lit up. That sounds promising. Could he have hidden something inside or near it? It's possible, Hope admitted. The tree is hollow in parts. We used to leave messages for each other there when we were courting. Then that's where we'll start, Quinn decided. But not until we're sure it's safe. I have a friend in town, Hank Donovan. He runs the general store and hears everything that happens. I'll ride in today, see what he knows about Whitaker's movements. Hope's hand shot out, grabbing Quinn's wrist. You can't leave us, she said, panic edging her voice. Quinn covered her hand with his own. Hope, this cabin is the safest place for you and Lily right now. No one knows you're here. I'll be back before nightfall, I promise. Hope wanted to protest further, but she knew he was right. They needed information. How will you explain suddenly showing up in town during winter? She asked instead. Quinn smiled slightly. I make regular trips for supplies. No one will think twice about it. Besides, he added, his smile fading, Whitaker's men don't pay much attention to a ranch hand from the Double R. I'm nobody to them. You're not nobody, Hope said quietly. Their eyes met again, and this time Quinn didn't look away. Something passed between them, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. The moment was broken by Lily's hungry cry. Hope reluctantly withdrew her hand from Quinn's and turned her attention to her daughter. I'll get ready to ride, Quinn said, standing. There's plenty of food and I've filled extra water buckets. Keep the fire going, but not too high. Smoke can be seen from a distance. And Hope. He paused, his expression grave. If anyone comes, there's a trap door under the rug by the hearth. Root cellar. Hide there and don't come out until you hear my whistle, 3 short, 1 long. Hope nodded, her throat tight with renewed fear. Be careful, Quinn. Always am, he replied with a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Within the hour, Quinn was gone, riding his chestnut stallion down the snow-covered path toward the distant town. Hope stood in the doorway watching until he disappeared from sight, then firmly barred the door as he had instructed. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Hope kept herself busy caring for Lily, tidying the already neat cabin and preparing a stew with the vegetables Quinn had stored in his root cellar. She tried not to worry, but as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, anxiety gnawed at her. What if Whitaker's men had captured Quinn? What if they'd followed him back? What if he'd betrayed her after all? No, she couldn't believe that last thought. In the short time she'd known Quinn Rafferty, she'd seen enough of his character to trust him. The gentle way he'd handled Lily, the respect he'd shown Hope herself, the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his parents, these were not the traits of a dishonest man. The shadows lengthened, and still Quinn did not return. Hope found herself pacing, Lily cradled against her shoulder. When the baby finally fell asleep, Hope laid her carefully on the bed, surrounding her with pillows to prevent her from rolling. Just as Hope was considering whether to load the Winchester rifle on the wall, something she'd never done, before she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Her heart leapt to her throat as she hurried to the window, peering through the gathering dusk. Relief flooded her when she recognized Quinn's broad-shouldered silhouette, but it quickly turned to concern as she realized he was riding hunched over, one hand pressed to his side. Hope threw open the door, rushing out into the cold. "Quinn, what happened?" He dismounted slowly, grimacing with pain. "Got into a bit of trouble," he admitted, leaning heavily against his horse. "Nothing serious." But Hope could see the dark stain spreading across his coat. "You're hurt," she gasped, moving to support him. "Come inside." Quinn allowed her to help him into the cabin, his breathing labored. Once inside, Hope eased him onto a chair and carefully removed his coat. His shirt underneath was soaked with blood from a wound in his left side. "Who did this?" she demanded, gathering clean cloths and the basin of water. "One of Whitaker's men," Quinn replied through gritted teeth. "Recognized me from somewhere. Started asking questions about strangers in the area." He hissed as Hope began to clean the wound. "He didn't get anything from me, but he managed this before I put him down." Hope's hands stilled. "You killed him." Quinn's eyes met hers, unflinching. "It was him or me, and if he'd followed me back here, it would have been you and Lily too." Hope nodded slowly, understanding the harsh reality of their situation. She returned to cleaning the wound, relieved to discover it was a deep graze rather than a penetrating injury. "You need stitches," she told him, rinsing the cloth in the now pink water. "There's a medicine kit in the trunk," Quinn directed, his voice strained. "Needle and catgut in there." Hope found the kit and set about preparing to stitch the wound. "I've done this before," she assured him, seeing his questioning look. "On our farm, accidents happened." Quinn nodded, then braced himself as she began to work. He remained stoically silent throughout the procedure, only the occasional tightening around his eyes betraying his pain. "Did you learn anything in town?" Hope asked, partly to distract him as she worked. Quinn's jaw clenched. "Whitaker's men are combing the territory for you. They're telling people you stole valuable documents and money before running off." "That's a lie," Hope exclaimed, her hands momentarily stilling. "I know," Quinn assured her, "but it gives them an excuse to search everywhere, and—" he hesitated. "And what?" Hope prompted, resuming her stitching. "They're saying the baby isn't Thomas's," Quinn said quietly. "That you were unfaithful, and that's why you ran fear of being found out." Hope's cheeks burned with anger and humiliation. "How dare they?" she whispered fiercely. "Thomas was the only man I've ever—" She broke off, blinking back tears. "Lily is his daughter, his legacy." "Anyone who sees her would know that," Quinn said gently. "She has his eyes." Hope looked up in surprise. "How would you know that?" Quinn's expression softened. "The daguerreotype on your locket. I noticed it while you were sleeping. The man in it, I assume that's Thomas." Hope's free hand went to the locket hanging around her neck. She'd almost forgotten she was wearing it. "Yes," she confirmed. "It was a wedding gift." "He looked like a good man," Quinn said simply. Hope nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She finished the last stitch and bandaged the wound carefully. "Thank you," Quinn said when she was done, experimentally stretching to test the stitches. "You've got a steady hand." Hope busied herself cleaning up the bloody cloths and water. "Did you learn anything else in town? About the evidence?" Quinn shook his head. "Nothing specific, but Hank did mention something odd. Whitaker's been in a panic ever since Thomas was killed. Apparently, he's offering $1,000 for your capture alive." Hope frowned. "He wants me alive." "Which means he doesn't know where the evidence is either," Quinn reasoned. "He's hoping you'll lead him to it. Or he thinks I know where it is," Hope added, a chill running down her spine. What if he tries to make me tell him?" Quinn's expression darkened. "That's not going to happen, Hope. I won't let it." The fierceness in his voice made her believe him. "So what do we do now?" she asked, sitting across from him at the table. We wait a few days for my side to heal and for the search to move on from this area, Quinn decided. Then we go to your homestead and find that oak tree. Hope nodded, though the thought of returning to the place where Thomas was murdered filled her with dread. And if we find the evidence? We take it to the federal marshal in Denver, Quinn said firmly. Whitaker may have the local law in his pocket, but the federal government takes land fraud seriously, especially when it involves murder. That's a long journey, Hope observed, glancing at Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully on the bed. We'll manage, Quinn assured her. One step at a time. The next few days established a routine that felt surprisingly domestic. Hope cared for Lily and tended to Quinn's wound, which was healing well thanks to her careful stitching. Quinn, despite Hope's protests that he should rest, insisted on handling the heavier chores, chopping wood, caring for his horse, and making minor repairs to the cabin that had been neglected. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives before tragedy struck. Hope learned that Quinn had been born on a small ranch in Kansas, the only child of hardworking parents who had moved west seeking better opportunities. He'd grown up breaking horses and herding cattle, developing a reputation as one of the best horsemen in the territory before Whitaker's men destroyed his family's ranch. In turn, Hope told Quinn about her childhood in St. Louis, where her father had been a schoolteacher. She'd met Thomas when he came to teach at the same school, and they'd fallen in love over shared books and dreams of a future in the West. They'd been married just 2 years when Lily was conceived. He was so excited, Hope recalled one evening as they sat by the fire, Lily sleeping in a makeshift cradle Quinn had constructed from a wooden crate. He started building the cradle that very day, said his daughter deserved the finest craftsmanship. Quinn smiled, watching the firelight play across Hope's features. He sounds like a man who knew what was important in life. He was, Hope agreed softly. I miss him terribly. She looked up at Quinn. Does it ever get easier, losing someone you love? Quinn was quiet for a long moment. Not easier, he finally said. Just different. At first the grief is like drowning, you can't breathe, can't think of anything else. Then gradually you learn to swim in it. The water's still there, but you're not going under anymore. Hope nodded, understanding. That's how it feels. Like I'm just barely keeping my head above water. You're doing better than that, Quinn assured her. You're protecting Lily, fighting for justice. That takes courage. I don't feel courageous, Hope admitted. Most days I'm terrified. That's what courage is, Quinn said simply. Being afraid but doing what needs doing anyway. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Hope felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with grief or fear. Quinn Rafferty was becoming something to her, something she wasn't ready to name, something that both comforted and confused her. On the 4th day, Quinn declared his wound sufficiently healed for travel. We should leave tomorrow at first light, he said over breakfast. The longer we wait, the more risk of Whitaker's men widening their search to this area. Hope agreed, though anxiety churned in her stomach at the thought of the journey. How far is it to my homestead from here? About a day's ride, Quinn replied. We'll need to be careful approaching. There might be men watching the property. Hope hadn't considered that possibility. Do you think they expect me to return? It's what I would do if I were hunting for something, Quinn said pragmatically. Set men to watch the most likely places. But, he added, seeing her expression, that's why we'll approach at night from the north. If your oak tree is at the north edge of the property, we might not have to go near the house at all. That evening they prepared for the journey. Quinn packed food, water, extra ammunition for his rifle and revolver, and blankets for the cold night ahead. Hope prepared what she could for Lily: clean cloths, a small bottle of goat's milk Quinn had obtained in town as a supplement to her own milk, and extra swaddling against the winter chill. As night fell, a sense of impending change settled over the small cabin. Tomorrow would determine their fate, whether they found Thomas's evidence or not, whether they could bring Whitaker to justice, or would remain hunted fugitives. "You should get some sleep," Quinn suggested as Hope finished nursing Lily. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Hope nodded but made no move toward the bed. "Quinn," she said hesitantly, "I want to thank you. For everything you've done for us, you didn't have to help us take us in, risk your life." Quinn's expression was unreadable in the firelight. "Yes, I did," he said quietly. "From the moment I heard that baby cry, there was never a question of riding away." "Still," Hope insisted, "most men would have. You're a good man, Quinn Rafferty." Something flickered in Quinn's eyes, a vulnerability that made him look younger, less hardened by life's cruelties. "I'm just doing what needs doing," he said, echoing his earlier words about courage. Hope surprised herself then, crossing the small space between them and placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered again. Quinn remained perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. When Hope drew back, his eyes were dark with an emotion she recognized but wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Get some sleep," he repeated, his voice rougher than before. "I'll take first watch." Hope nodded and retreated to the bed, her heart pounding in her chest. What was she doing, allowing herself to feel this way about Quinn? Thomas was barely cold in his grave, yet something about Quinn Rafferty made her feel safe, understood, alive in a way she hadn't expected to feel again. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams a confused mixture of Thomas's dying words, Lily's cries, and Quinn's steady presence. Morning arrived with a sky heavy with the promise of snow. They set out as planned, Quinn on his stallion with Hope and Lily seated behind him. The journey was slow and cautious, with Quinn frequently stopping to listen for any signs of pursuit or danger. By midday, fat snowflakes began to fall, gradually thickening until they were riding through a curtain of white. Quinn pulled his coat closer around him, then reached back to adjust the blanket covering Hope and Lily. "Weather's turning worse than I expected," he admitted. "We might need to find shelter for a few hours." Hope peered around his broad back at the landscape, increasingly obscured by snow. "How much farther to the homestead?" "About another 4 hours in good conditions," Quinn replied. "In this." He gestured at the thickening snow. "Maybe 6 or 7. Hope considered this, bouncing slightly to soothe a fussing Lily. "Is there shelter nearby?" Quinn scanned the area, his experienced eyes picking out landmarks barely visible through the snow. "There's an old line shack about a mile east of here, used by cowhands during the summer months. Should be empty now." "Let's go there," Hope decided, "just until the worst passes." Quinn nodded and turned his horse toward the east. Within 20 minutes, a small, weathered structure appeared through the swirling snow. It was little more than a single room with a stone fireplace, but it offered protection from the elements. Quinn helped Hope and Lily inside, then went to settle his horse in the lean-to attached to the shack's western wall. When he returned, stomping snow from his boots, Hope had already laid Lily on a rough bunk and was attempting to start a fire with the meager supply of wood stacked by the hearth. "Let me," Quinn offered, kneeling beside her. His experienced hands quickly coaxed flames from the kindling. As warmth gradually filled the small space, they shared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and dried apples. The snowstorm raged outside, wind howling around the corners of the shack and finding its way through cracks in the walls and roof. "We'll have to stay here tonight," Quinn finally said, peering through a window at the white wasteland outside. "Trying to reach your homestead in this would be too dangerous." Hope nodded, disappointment mingling with relief. Part of her wanted to delay returning to the place where Thomas died. Another part was desperate to find his evidence and end the nightmare of being hunted. One more day won't matter, she said, more to convince herself than Quinn. The evidence has been hidden for weeks already. Quinn added another log to the fire, then settled beside her on the rough plank floor. "Tell me more about the oak tree," he suggested. "How big is it? Any distinctive features that would help us find it in the dark?" Hope closed her eyes, visualizing the massive tree that had been a constant presence during her time on the homestead. It's enormous. 3 men couldn't link arms around the trunk. Part of it was struck by lightning years ago, so there's a big scar down one side. And our initials TP and HP are carved about eye level on the north side. Quinn nodded, mentally noting these details. And the hollow part. "There's an opening about halfway up where a branch broke off," Hope explained. "It's big enough to reach an arm inside." "That sounds promising," Quinn said. "If Thomas hid documents there, they should be protected from the elements." "Unless animals have nested there," Hope worried. "Or the snow has somehow gotten in." "We'll find out tomorrow," Quinn assured her. "For now, let's focus on getting through the night." As darkness fell, the temperature dropped significantly despite the fire. Lily began to fuss, uncomfortable with the cold. Hope wrapped her more tightly in blankets, but the baby continued to cry. "She needs more warmth," Hope said worriedly, holding Lily against her chest. Quinn hesitated, then moved closer. "Body heat," he suggested somewhat awkwardly. If we sit close together, we can share warmth." "For the baby's sake." Hope nodded, grateful for the practical suggestion. Quinn settled against the wall near the fire, and Hope carefully positioned herself beside him, Lily cradled between them. Quinn cautiously put his arm around Hope's shoulders, drawing her closer to his side. The arrangement worked. Lily quieted, content in the cocoon of warmth created by their bodies. Hope found herself relaxing into Quinn's embrace, her head eventually coming to rest against his shoulder. "Better?" Quinn asked softly. "Much," Hope murmured, suddenly very aware of his proximity, of the steady rise and fall of his chest, of the faint scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. They sat in silence for a long while, listening to the storm and the crackling fire. Hope thought Quinn might have fallen asleep until he spoke, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear him. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he said, almost as if speaking to himself. Hope lifted her head slightly to look at him. "Feel what way?" Quinn's eyes reflected the firelight as they met hers. "Like maybe there's something worth fighting for beyond revenge, something to live for." The raw honesty in his voice made Hope's heart constrict. "Quinn, I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "I know you're grieving. And I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you and Lily." He paused, searching for words. "You've reminded me that life can be more than just surviving." Hope was quiet for a long moment, her own conflicted emotions swirling like the storm outside. "I feel guilty," she finally admitted, "for feeling anything besides grief for Thomas. It seems like a betrayal." Quinn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I felt the same way after my parents died, like being happy again would somehow dishonor their memory." "Does it go away, the guilt?" Hope asked. "Eventually," Quinn said softly. "When you realize that the people who loved you wouldn't want you to stop living just because they did." Hope considered his words, finding truth in them. Thomas had always been full of life, encouraging her to embrace joy wherever she found it. Would he really want her to shut herself off from feelings, from connection? "We should try to get some sleep," Quinn suggested after another comfortable silence. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Hope nodded, but neither of them moved from their position. Eventually, lulled by warmth and exhaustion, they both drifted off to sleep, Lily secure between them. Hope awoke to pale morning light filtering through the shack's small window. The storm had passed during the night, leaving a pristine blanket of snow outside. Quinn was already up, rekindling the fire and preparing a simple breakfast from their supplies. "Morning," he greeted, his voice carefully neutral, as if uncertain how Hope would feel about their conversation and closeness from the night before. "Good morning," Hope replied, shifting a still sleeping Lily to check her diaper. "The storm's passed," Quinn nodded. "We should be able to reach your homestead by early afternoon. The snow will slow us down, but it also means we'll leave tracks. We'll need to be extra cautious approaching the property." They ate quickly, then packed their few belongings. Quinn saddled his horse while Hope bundled Lily for the journey. By mid-morning they were back on the trail, the horse plowing steadily through snow that reached halfway up its legs. As they rode, Hope found herself growing increasingly tense. Every mile brought them closer to the place where her life had shattered, where Thomas had died in her arms. Quinn seemed to sense her distress. He reached back occasionally to squeeze her hand reassuringly. "We'll be careful," he promised. "In and out quickly." Hope nodded against his back, grateful for his steady presence. The sun was beginning its descent when Quinn reined in the horse at the top of a small rise. Below them, partially obscured by trees and snow, lay Hope's homestead. The simple cabin, barn, and outbuildings appeared undamaged from this distance, though Hope could make out dark scorch marks on the porch where Thomas had fallen. "I don't see anyone," Quinn said quietly, scanning the property. "But that doesn't mean they're not there. We'll circle around to the north, approach the oak from the forest line." Hope nodded, her throat too tight for words. Seeing her home like this, so familiar yet forever changed, was more difficult than she had anticipated. They rode carefully along the edge of the forest that bordered the northern boundary of the property. As the sun touched the western mountains, Quinn pointed ahead. "Is that it?" Hope followed his gaze and felt a surge of emotion. There stood the great oak, its massive branches stark against the darkening sky. "Yes," she whispered. "That's it." Quinn dismounted, then helped Hope and Lily down. "Stay here with the horse," he instructed. "I'll check the tree first, make sure there's no one watching." Hope wanted to protest, to insist on going with him, but she knew Lily's safety had to come first. She nodded reluctantly. "Be careful." Quinn squeezed her shoulder, then moved silently through the trees toward the oak. Hope watched his progress, her heart in her throat. He reached the tree without incident and circled it once, checking for any signs of danger before waving for her to join him. Hope approached cautiously, Lily bundled tightly against her chest. As she reached the oak, a flood of memories washed over her, Thomas carving their initials while she watched, laughing. The two of them picnicking in its shade during the hot summer months. Thomas telling her that this tree had stood for hundreds of years and would stand for hundreds more, a testament to endurance. "The initials," Quinn prompted gently, pulling her from her reverie. Hope blinked back tears and moved to the north side of the trunk. There, exactly as she remembered, were the carved letters, TP and HP, enclosed in a rough heart. "And the hollow?" Quinn asked. Hope pointed upward to where a large branch had broken away years before, leaving a cavity in the trunk about 7 feet up. "There." Quinn studied the opening. "I'll need to boost you. You're lighter and your arms are smaller." Hope handed Lily to him, surprised at how natural it felt to entrust her daughter to his care. Quinn cradled the baby expertly in one arm, then bent slightly to create a step with his other hand. "Ready?" he asked. Hope nodded, placing her foot in his hand. With surprising strength, Quinn boosted her up until she could reach the hollow. Balancing awkwardly, she reached her arm inside, feeling around in the darkness. At first, there was nothing, just the rough interior of the tree. damp from snow and years of exposure. Then her fingers brushed against something that didn't belong, something smooth and cylindrical. "I found something," she exclaimed, straining to grasp the object. Her fingers closed around it, and she carefully withdrew a metal tube, the kind used to protect important documents. Quinn lowered her gently to the ground, his eyes fixed on the tube. "Is that it?" Hope turned the cylinder in her hands. It was sealed tightly, protected from the elements. "It has to be. Thomas must have hidden it here the day they came, knowing they were closing in." With trembling fingers, she unscrewed the cap. Inside was a roll of papers, wrapped in oilcloth for additional protection. Hope carefully extracted them and unfolded the first document. "Land deeds," she confirmed, scanning the papers. "And letters between Whitaker and the county judge, discussing payoffs for looking the other way." Her voice hardened. "This is it. This is what Thomas died for." Quinn peered over her shoulder at the documents, Lily still cradled in his arm. "This is more than enough to bring Whitaker down," he agreed. "But we need to get moving. It's not safe to linger here." Hope nodded, carefully returning the papers to the tube and securing the cap. As she did so, a movement near the house caught her eye. "Quinn," she whispered urgently, "someone's there." Quinn turned sharply, his free hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Through the gathering darkness, they could make out two men on horseback approaching the cabin. "Whitaker's men," Quinn muttered. "Looking for tracks, most likely." "We need to go now." They retreated quickly into the forest, Quinn leading the way back to where they had left his horse. Hope clutched the metal tube to her chest, her heart pounding with fear and triumph. They had the evidence now, they just needed to escape with it. Quinn helped Hope mount first, handing Lily up to her, then swung up behind them. With expert handling, he guided the horse deeper into the forest, away from the homestead and the men who would kill them for what they now possessed. They rode until full darkness made further progress too dangerous, then made a cold camp in a dense thicket. No fire, no light, nothing that might attract attention. They shared dried meat and hardtack, speaking in whispers. "We'll head for Denver at first light," Quinn decided. "It's a 3-day journey in good weather, maybe 5 with the snow and having to avoid main trails." Hope nodded, feeding Lily, who had been remarkably quiet throughout the day's events. "Do you think those men saw our tracks?" Quinn considered this. "Possible, but not certain. The fresh snow this morning would have covered our approach. If we're lucky, they won't realize anyone was there until we're well away." "And if we're not lucky?" Hope asked. Quinn's expression was grim. "Then we ride hard and hope we reach the federal marshal before they catch us." The night passed tensely, with Quinn taking watch while Hope tried to rest with Lily. Every sound in the forest made them tense, expecting discovery at any moment. But morning arrived without incident, and they set out again as the first light touched the eastern sky. The journey to Denver was arduous. They traveled by day, keeping to less used trails and forest paths, and made cold camps at night. Twice they spotted riders in the distance that Quinn identified as Whitaker's men, forcing them to hide until the danger passed. Lily, perhaps sensing the gravity of their situation, was unusually well behaved, crying only when hungry or uncomfortable. On the third day, snow began to fall again, heavy and persistent. Quinn pushed on despite the worsening conditions, knowing the snow would help cover their tracks, but also make travel more difficult. By nightfall, they were forced to seek proper shelter. Quinn remembered an abandoned trapper's cabin in the area and led them to it, a crude structure, but with walls and a roof that would keep out the worst of the storm. "We'll rest here tonight," he decided, helping Hope and Lily inside. "The storm will slow any pursuit, and we all need proper rest." For the first time in days, they risked a small fire. As warmth gradually filled the cabin, Hope felt some of the tension leave her body. She fed Lily, changed her, and settled her in a nest of blankets before joining Quinn by the fire. "We're making good progress," he assured her, passing her a cup of hot coffee. "Another 2 days should see us in Denver." Hope nodded, sipping the strong, bitter liquid gratefully. "Do you think Whitaker knows we have the evidence by now?" "Almost certainly," Quinn replied honestly. "Those men we saw at your homestead would have reported back, and finding the hollow in the oak empty." He shrugged. "Whitaker's not a fool. He'll have figured it out." Hope's hand unconsciously went to the metal tube now secured inside her coat. "He'll be desperate to stop us." "Which is why we need to be even more careful these next 2 days," Quinn agreed. "But Hope," he reached out, his hand covering hers, "we're going to make it. I promise." The certainty in his voice made Hope want to believe him. She turned her hand to clasp his, drawing strength from his touch. "When this is over," she said hesitantly, "what will you do?" Quinn was quiet for a moment. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "For 3 years, bringing Whitaker down has been my only goal after that." He shrugged. "Go back to ranching, I suppose. The double R has been good to me." Hope nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. She hadn't allowed herself to think beyond reaching Denver either. But now, faced with the prospect of success, she realized she had no plan for what came after. Her homestead held too many painful memories to return to, yet she had nowhere else to go. "And you?" Quinn asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Will you go back to St. Louis?" Hope shook her head. "There's nothing for me there. My parents are gone and she hesitated. "I don't know. I need to provide for Lily, give her a stable home, but I don't know where that will be." Quinn seemed about to say something, then changed his mind. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thoughts of an uncertain future. Finally, Quinn spoke again. "Hope, I want you to know that whatever happens in Denver, you and Lily won't be alone. I'll make sure you're settled somewhere safe, with means to support yourselves." Hope looked up at him, touched by his concern yet strangely disappointed. "That's very kind of you, Quinn." Quinn's brow furrowed at her tone. "But," Hope sighed. "No, but I'm grateful, truly." She attempted a smile. "It's just been a long few days. We should get some rest." Quinn studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You take the bunk with Lily. I'll keep watch for a while." As Hope settled beside her sleeping daughter, she found herself wishing Quinn had said something different. Something about the three of them, not just about ensuring she and Lily were settled somewhere. But that was unfair, she reminded herself. Quinn had already done more than anyone could reasonably expect. She had no right to want more from him. With these conflicted thoughts swirling in her mind, Hope eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. She awoke to the sound of horses outside. Many horses. Quinn was instantly alert, moving silently to the window. "Whitaker's men," he whispered urgently. "At least 6 of them. They must have tracked us through the storm." Hope's blood ran cold. She moved quickly to gather Lily, who was just beginning to stir. "Is there a back way out?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Quinn shook his head. "Just the front door, but there's a cellar." He moved a rough rug aside, revealing a trap door. "Get down there with Lily. I'll hold them off." "No," Hope protested. "That's suicide. Come with us." "There's no time to argue," Quinn insisted as the sound of boots crunching on snow grew closer. "I can buy you time to escape through the cellar. There should be an exit that leads to the creek bed. Follow it west. It'll take you toward Denver." "Quinn, please," Hope begged, tears forming in her eyes. "Don't do this." Quinn crossed to her in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "Hope, listen to me. What we have, these documents can bring down not just Whitaker but his entire operation. It's bigger than us. You have to get to Denver with that evidence." Outside, a voice called out. "We know you're in there, Rafferty. Come out peaceful-like, and maybe we'll let the woman and child live." Quinn's jaw tightened. "They're lying," he said quietly. "Get to the cellar now." Hope knew he was right, but the thought of leaving him to face Whitaker's men alone was unbearable. "I can't lose you too," she whispered. Something flashed in Quinn's eyes, surprise, followed by a deep emotion that made Hope's heart race. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, a brief but fierce contact that conveyed everything they hadn't said. "You won't lose me," he promised when they parted. "I'll find you. Now go." With one last, desperate glance at him, Hope descended into the cellar, Lily clutched tightly to her chest. Quinn closed the trapdoor above them, replacing the rug to hide it from view. The cellar was damp and dark, with only a faint light filtering through cracks in the floorboards above. Hope could hear Quinn moving around, presumably preparing to defend himself. She should be searching for the exit he'd mentioned, but she couldn't make herself move, couldn't bear to leave while Quinn faced death above her. Through the floorboards, she heard the cabin door crash open. Well, if it ain't Quinn Rafferty," drawled a voice Hope didn't recognize. "Still sticking your nose where it don't belong, I see." "Jed Wilson," Quinn replied evenly. "Still doing Whitaker's dirty work. Thought you'd have moved up in the world by now." There was a harsh laugh. "Where's the woman, Rafferty, and the evidence?" "Long gone," Quinn replied. "Sent them to Denver days ago with a friend. You're too late." "I don't believe you," Wilson said. "Search the place, boys." Hope held her breath as heavy footsteps moved across the floor above her head. Lily, perhaps sensing her fear, remained blessedly quiet. "Nothing here, boss," reported another voice after several tense minutes. "No sign of a woman or baby." "Check outside," Wilson ordered. "They can't have gone far in this weather." Hope heard several men exit the cabin, leaving fewer footsteps above. 2, perhaps 3 remained with Quinn. "You're making a mistake, Wilson," Quinn said conversationally. "The federal marshal already has copies of everything. Killing me won't save Whitaker." "Maybe not," Wilson agreed. "But it'll sure make me feel better. You've been a thorn in our side for years, Rafferty." There was a momentary silence, then the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Any last words?" Wilson asked. Hope's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a cry. She couldn't let this happen. Without thinking, she shifted Lily to one arm and reached for the small derringer Quinn had given her for protection. It held only 2 shots, but it might be enough to create a distraction. Before she could act, the quiet was shattered by a sudden commotion outside, shouts, followed by gunfire. "What the hell?" Wilson exclaimed. Above, footsteps rushed to the door. More gunfire erupted closer now. Hope heard the crash of breaking glass, then Quinn's voice, urgent and commanding, "Get down." What followed was chaos: gunshots, shouts, the sound of bodies falling. Hope clutched Lily tightly, whispering soothing words to keep her quiet despite the terrifying noise. The firefight seemed to last forever, though in reality it was probably less than a minute. Then, silence. Hope held her breath, straining to hear any sign of who had prevailed. Had Quinn survived? Or was it Wilson and his men regrouping, preparing to search more thoroughly for her? "Hope," Quinn's voice, strained but unmistakably alive, called out. "Hope, it's safe now. You can come out." Relief flooded through her, but caution made her hesitate. "Quinn, are you alone?" "Not exactly," came the reply, followed by a new voice, older, authoritative. "Madam, this is Marshal James Harker, United States Federal Marshal's office. You can come up now. It's secure." Hope's mind reeled. A federal marshal, here? Carefully, she made her way to the trap door and pushed upward. Quinn immediately lifted it fully open, reaching down to help her and Lily up. The scene that greeted her was one of carnage. 3 of Whitaker's men, including Wilson, lay dead on the cabin floor. 2 more were seated against the wall, hands bound behind them, under the watchful eye of several men wearing badges. Quinn himself was bloodied but standing, a deep gash across his forehead, and what appeared to be a bullet graze on his left arm. But he was alive, and the relief of seeing him made Hope's knees weak. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. Hope shook her head, leaning into his touch. "We're fine, but how?" She looked questioningly at the marshal. Marshal Harker, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, stepped forward. "We've been tracking Whitaker's operation for months," he explained. "Got word he'd sent a large party of men after someone who had evidence against him. Been following them for 2 days." He nodded toward Quinn. "Lucky for you two we caught up when we did." Quinn's arm slipped around Hope's waist, drawing her and Lily closer. "Very lucky," he agreed. "Thank you, Marshal." Harker nodded, then gestured to the metal tube visible inside Hope's coat. "I assume that's what Whitaker's so desperate to get his hands on." Hope nodded, withdrawing the tube and handing it to the marshal. "My husband collected these before he was murdered. Land deeds, letters proving fraud and conspiracy. There's even a list of officials Whitaker was bribing." Harker examined the documents, his expression growing more grave with each page. "This is exactly what we needed," he confirmed. "Enough to put Whitaker away for the rest of his life." He looked up at Hope, genuine sympathy in his eyes. "Your husband was a brave man, Mrs. Porter. His sacrifice won't be in vain." Hope nodded, emotion closing her throat. "What happens now?" she managed to ask. "We ride for Denver," Harker decided. "We have horses enough for you both. Whitaker needs to answer for his crimes, and the sooner the better." As the marshals prepared to depart, treating Quinn's wounds and securing their prisoners, Hope found a moment alone with Quinn in a corner of the cabin. "You knew they were coming," she accused softly. "When you sent me to the cellar, you knew." Quinn had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I hoped," he corrected. "I spotted one of their scouts earlier today and managed to signal him without you seeing. Wasn't sure if they'd arrive in time, though." "You could have told me," Hope said, a hint of reproach in her voice. Quinn shook his head. "Couldn't risk it. If things had gone wrong, I needed you and Lily safely hidden, ready to escape." His expression softened. "I meant what I said, though. I would have found you." Hope studied his face, seeing the sincerity there. "And that other thing you did?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you mean that too?" Quinn's eyes darkened, and he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Every bit of it," he confirmed. "I know it's too soon, and I know you're still grieving Thomas, but Hope." He took a deep breath. "I've fallen in love with you. With both of you," he added, glancing at Lily, who was watching him with wide eyes. "And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to be part of your lives, properly." Hope's heart swelled with an emotion she'd been trying to deny for days. "It is too soon," she agreed softly. "I do still grieve for Thomas. I always will in some way." She reached up to touch Quinn's cheek. "But I think he would want me to be happy, to give Lily a father who loves her." "I already do," Quinn admitted, gently touching Lily's tiny hand. To both their surprise, the baby grabbed his finger, holding on with surprising strength. Hope couldn't help smiling. "She approves." Quinn's answering smile was tender. "Smart girl." Marshal Harker's voice broke the moment. "We're ready to move out," he announced. "Storms let up enough for travel. We should reach Denver by tomorrow evening if we push on." Quinn nodded, but kept his eyes on Hope. "Ready for this?" he asked softly. Hope took a deep breath, feeling a curious mix of closure and new beginning. "Yes," she said firmly. "It's time Whitaker paid for what he's done." The journey to Denver passed without incident. The combined party of federal marshals, prisoners, and our small family made good time across the snow-covered landscape. As promised, they reached the city by the following evening, tired but triumphant. Edgar Whitaker was arrested at his lavish Denver home that same night. According to Marshal Harker, the land baron had gone pale upon seeing the evidence against him, attempting first to bribe and then to threaten his way out of the situation. Neither approach worked. "He'll hang for the murders," Harker informed Quinn and Hope when he visited them at the hotel where they'd been given rooms. "And his entire operation will be dismantled. The land will be returned to its rightful owners where possible, or opened for legitimate claims." "And the homestead?" Hope asked quietly. "Thomas's land," Harker's expression softened. "It's yours, Mrs. Porter, by right and by law. You can return there when this is all over if you wish." Hope nodded, though she wasn't sure she wanted to. Too many painful memories lingered there, but it was good to have options. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of testimonies, legal proceedings, and gradually diminishing fear. Hope found herself growing stronger each day, supported by Quinn, who rarely left her side. Their relationship developed slowly, respectful of her grief, yet increasingly warm as they built a foundation of trust and shared experiences. Lily thrived under their joint care, growing and changing daily. Quinn proved to be a natural with her, his large hands capable of incredible gentleness when cradling her small form. Hope often found herself watching them together, her heart full of a complicated but beautiful mix of emotions. 1 month after their arrival in Denver, Whitaker's trial concluded with the verdict they had hoped for: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to hang, along with his most culpable associates. The rest received prison sentences of varying lengths. That evening, Quinn and Hope walked together through a small park near their hotel, Lily bundled warmly against the early spring chill. The weight of Whitaker's threat had finally lifted, leaving them free to consider the future. "I've been thinking," Quinn said as they paused near a flowering crabapple tree, "about what comes next." Hope looked up at him, her heart quickening. Over the past month, her feelings for him had deepened into something she could no longer deny was love. Different from what she'd felt for Thomas, but no less real. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. Quinn took a deep breath. "I've saved most of my wages these past 3 years, enough to buy a small spread of my own. There's good land opening up near the Colorado-Wyoming border. Good grazing, plenty of water." He hesitated. "It would be a fine place to raise cattle and children." Hope's breath caught. "Quinn, I know it might still be too soon," he continued quickly, "and I'll wait as long as you need. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, I'd like to make a home with you and Lily. A real home as a family." Hope was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Then she shifted Lily to one arm and reached for Quinn's hand with her free one. "Thomas will always be part of me, part of Lily," she said softly. "But I've learned that love isn't finite. It grows to include new people, new chapters." She squeezed his hand. "I don't want to wait, Quinn. Life is too unpredictable, too precious to delay happiness when it's offered." Quinn's expression transformed with hope. "Hope Porter, are you saying what I think you're saying?" Hope smiled, the first full, unrestrained smile since the night Thomas died. "I'm saying yes, Quinn Rafferty. Yes to that land near the border, yes to raising cattle and children, yes to making a home together." Her voice softened. "Yes to loving you." Quinn's answering smile was radiant. He bent down to kiss her, a gentle, reverent touch that held the promise of 1,000 more to come. "I won't let you regret this," he vowed when they parted. "I'll spend every day making sure you and Lily are safe, happy, loved." "I know you will," Hope replied, absolute certainty in her voice. "You already do." 3 months later, Hope stood on the porch of a newly built ranch house, watching as Quinn worked with his small but growing herd of cattle in the distance. Lily, now 8 months old, sat on a blanket nearby, playing with wooden blocks Quinn had carved for her. The land they had chosen was everything Quinn had promised: rolling hills perfect for grazing, a clear stream running through the property, and mountains visible in the distance. The house itself was modest but solid, built with Quinn's own hands and those of the friends he'd made over his years in the territory. Hope had contributed too, choosing the layout, insisting on large windows to let in the light, planting a garden that would provide food and beauty. Together, they had created a home that held no ghosts, only possibilities. They had married quietly in Denver before heading north to their new land. The ceremony was simple, attended only by Marshal Harker and a few others who had helped bring Whitaker to justice. Hope had worn a new blue dress, Lily in her arms throughout the brief service. Quinn had looked at her as if she were the sunrise after the longest night. Now, as Quinn rode toward the house, his day's work complete, Hope felt a contentment she had once feared would never be hers again. Their journey had begun in tragedy and desperation, a terrified mother clutching her infant daughter, a cowboy haunted by his past. "Please don't take my baby," she had cried, and Quinn had answered with a promise. "Madam, I'm here to carry you both home." He had kept that promise, and in doing so had given them all a new beginning. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something different, equally precious. Quinn dismounted at the hitching post, removing his hat as he approached the porch. His face, tanned from months working outdoors, broke into a smile that still made Hope's heart skip. "How are my girls?" he asked, scooping Lily up as she squealed in delight at his appearance. "We're perfect," Hope replied, moving to join them. "Just waiting for you to come home." Quinn's free arm circled her waist, drawing her close. "I'll always come home to you," he promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Both of you." Hope leaned into his embrace, watching as Lily patted Quinn's cheek with her small hand. This was their future days of hard work and quiet evenings, challenges overcome together, a family built on choice rather than blood. It wasn't the life Hope had envisioned when she'd married Thomas and moved west. It wasn't the vengeance Quinn had sought for 3 lonely years. It was something neither of them had expected to find in the aftermath of such profound loss: a second chance, a new love, a home carried safely through the storm. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Hope offered up a silent thank you to the fate that had brought Quinn to her that desperate day. To Thomas for loving her enough to want her happiness even after he was gone, and to her own heart for being brave enough to begin again. "I love you," she said softly, the words still new enough to feel precious on her tongue. Quinn's answer was in his eyes, in his touch, in the life they were building together. "And I love you," he replied, simple words for a truth that had changed everything. On the horizon, storm clouds gathered again. Life on the frontier would never be without challenges. But this time, Hope wasn't afraid. Whatever came, they would face it together, a family forged in adversity and bound by love. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, would be enough.